Welcome to Play Your Way to Healthier Conflict with Zombies.
Ooh.
So hi, I'm Amanda Semenoff.
And I'm Sharon Sutherland.
And we are both mediators and conflict resolution professionals working in Delta, New West, and Vancouver, BC, and sometimes traveling further away.
Yeah, and we're also, for the purposes of this particular presentation, we work together in Pig and Potato Games, which is actually a cooperative of a number of conflict resolution professionals who are interested in how games fit in with our conflict resolution work.
Yeah, and so we are just going to sort of chat for a few moments and kind of wait for Mediate BC to give us the big thumbs up that they're actually broadcasting this as well. So Sharon's going to say stuff for a moment while I do some typing over here and make sure that everything's good.
I think Sharon might just start showing some zombie cards as a little bit of a delay, just to stimulate interest in what are we going to do with zombies as we go. And you'll note that Amanda's also wearing a rather beautiful zombie shirt.
Designed by Tuna.
Yes, art by Tuna. Let's give credit to our artist right now. All right, so how are we doing, Amanda? It looks like we've got Mediate BC live, so it's awesome. Presumably time for us to kickstart. And
so we would just like to say once again, this is Play Your Way to Healthier Conflict with Zombies. And today we're doing this broadcast as part of Mediate BC's virtual expo, an initiative for Conflict Resolution Week, which runs November 3rd to 10th and aims to raise public awareness of collaborative dispute resolution processes.
Okay.
Welcome.
And for those who don't know, Mediate BC is a not-for-profit organization that leads, promotes, and facilitates mediation and other collaborative dispute resolution processes in the province.
Yeah. And you can also check out Mediate BC's Facebook page for more folks broadcasting on topics about conflict resolution all this week.
And Mediate BC would really like us to say that the opinions we're about to express are not necessarily theirs. They are definitely our own opinions. And in fact, I'm not even sure I'm going to own any of the opinions that Amanda expresses.
No, that's not a good idea. Mine are definitely mine. And Sharon's are definitely Sharon's. And we agree sometimes.
Sometimes, but we've learned how to get along. Anyway, I'm going to say hi to Pat, who I see has signed in and said hi. And I will welcome anybody who is joining us. Feel free to let us know that you're there, and we'll monitor for questions or comments as we're going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely say hi. Ask any questions as they come up. There is a touch of a delay between when you say hi and when we see it. So do make sure that you ask your questions as soon as you think of them, so we actually have time to answer before we sign out. So should we get into our content?
Sure, let's do that.
Right, so I think we're going to start with this concept of how normal competitive play is. So most of us start thinking about play in competitive terms from the time we're very, very young.
And I think it's not even that we start thinking about it that way. I think we would probably think of it in many other ways. I think that we are socialized to think that the only normal way to engage in play and the only beneficial way to engage in play is to learn about competition. That somehow competition is inherently a positive thing to engage in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we hear this a lot in the dialogue around sport, that sport teaches kids all of these skills that we think they need to have. And one of the things that we see is that we forget about all of the skills about collaboration, cooperation, about how we can actually work together. And we all know that the majority of things we do in relationship, and that's not what we're learning through competitive play.
And I kind of want to go to that one thing you said, Amanda, because we both know that if you say that in a sports world, a lot of people will say, team sports are actually a great way to learn about team play. And it's fascinating to me that, because there is that potential, there's absolutely that potential, and great coaches, great supportive parents, there are so many ways in which that truly can be the case. But the majority of sports that I've seen kids engage in doesn't actually do that. They'll be saying, here's your positions, here's how you play on this team sport, but they'll celebrate one kid. They'll celebrate the one who puts the ball in the net. They'll celebrate the one who hits the home run. They'll celebrate the pitcher. It's really structured such that you manage to create competition even within teams, as opposed to get that real sense that everybody wins together.
Well, and we're often pushing kids for a level of success that's only achievable if they are better than their peers.
Yeah.
Right? Which is not necessarily how we as a group do better things. So what does that mean for us when we get into conflict?
Well, it definitely means that we do not necessarily learn any of the skills that you need for conflict resolution while we're learning to play. And yet that's a place where we keep engaging in conflict.
It also means that often we make bad choices, right? We're making the kinds of choices that will win this moment instead of resolving this conflict, or instead of maintaining this relationship that's really important to us. And we can think about that like winning at all costs kind of concept. I like to think of it when we're driving, you know, that guy that like pulls in front of you, speeds up, squishes in, does all kinds of stuff that is really, really dangerous for the rest of us, and yet gets to the end of your hour drive at the same time as you.
Yeah. But it was a win. Somehow it felt successful.
It's 2 cars further ahead, right?
Yeah. And I mean, for me, when I think about like working as a mediator, for instance, one of the most common things I experience when I'm talking with people who might have a continuing relationship, might be neighbors, might be people who work together. They often are trying to engage in this negotiation that they're having from a place of, but don't tell the other person that this is what I want. Somehow it makes me weak to express what I want. And that's an entirely competitive approach to what's going on. If you're going to continue working together, saying, this is a need I have, something that matters to me, a resolution we reach needs to have this. It's not weak, it's smart.
Oh, but you could be exploited there.
Exactly. Exactly. Which we think is true if we play only games where sharing information results in some kind of exposure to defeat.
You know, it's very true. And I think that one other place where we see this sort of competitive frame really causing us damages is in our relationships, where we win the moments and destroy the relationship over time. So, I mean, you always hear that, like, you know, you can have a really good relationship with your kids, but only if you don't need to be right all the time. You can have a really good relationship with your partner, but only if you don't need to be right all the time. And that, like, in every moment that we force the win, we can erode the relationship and destroy it through time.
Absolutely. No, that's well put. So what happened for us is that we were having conversations about these kinds of topics, and they were really, at that time, primarily focused on our work as conflict resolution professionals. But suddenly we kind of asked ourselves, so what if instead of playing Monopoly and Risk as our only family games on various family events, what if we were playing games that actually required you to be collaborative and cooperative?
Yeah, and as kind of geeky gamers, some of us, I will own that, right? We were playing a few of these really complicated collaborative games that weren't accessible to the non-gamer people that are in our lives. And so coming together as a group, thinking about, can we make something that's fun, that would be simple enough to play with people that don't view themselves as gamers? Yeah. Right?
Yeah, because I do want to acknowledge that there's a lot of really interesting collaborative games out there. And if anybody's interested, folks want to ask us questions, we can absolutely point you to a lot of games that tend to be more complex, as Amanda said, but there's lots of them out there, and there's lots of ways in which you can engage.
And some that you would play on multiple sessions for maybe even a year, right? Like these big, long, complex things that can be great for a family for whom that is important. But there's an awful lot of people that don't want to be engaged in that kind of game. So what kind of game is useful in a more diverse setting with people that don't traditionally play games? Yeah.
So that's what was underlying the conversations we had with some other conflict resolution professionals around what could we make. And I mean, this is what we made. and I'm going to, like, again, emphasize Art by Tuna as just fantastic artwork and why these are so pretty. But the concept came from working with conflict resolution professionals and looking at ways that we could create something that was fast, accessible, easy to learn, and could be played in succession, a number of games, so that you could get new things out of it, playing more than one game.
And so that any learnings from the first or second game, it's only 10 or 15 minutes in and we're already on the third game. And especially when I play with kids, that reiterative learning, that like we tried it didn't work, let's try it again, it didn't work, let's try it again, we did a little bit better. That kind of iteration allows for actually really deep and really quick learning.
Yeah, and you're talking about kids, playing with kids, Amanda. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think we were mostly thinking we wanted to talk about how much we enjoyed playing with people with different abilities.
Yeah, no, this is something that I found really interesting. So I have kids, they're 2 years apart, and games were really, really hard in our household, especially when we were just started, because at 2 years, at say, let's 6 and 8, when we were first starting to do this kind of game design, the 8-year-old wants the rules and the 6-year-old can't participate. And if we change the rules a little bit, it's unfair for one. If we don't change the rules, it's unfair for the other in any game where there's any level of skill requirement. And so looking at a collaborative game where the kid with the higher ability has to support the play of the younger child, really allows them to value one another and to kind of think of the game in very different terms. And what we found in our household as my kids were learning to play is this real shift from, I am smarter than her, I am better than her, I am more skilled than her, she is incompetent and uninteresting, to, wow, my sister has a couple of good ideas. Yeah. Wow, my sister can play games with me. And we actually saw that shift carried from playing, just even test playing the game at the kitchen table, into other cooperative play they were doing in the house. And so it became much less directive by the older, more skilled child, and much more inclusive of the ideas and concepts of the younger child. And that has carried all the way through. So that's something that developed there and may have developed anyways, but I found was really actually pretty dramatic, at least in our house. And we've been then able to play with other kids who don't have as much conflict resolution dialogue in their home as mine do.
Yeah. And one of the things that's been interesting, Amanda's one of the people who's found this, but a number of us have kind of encountered in this in working at the other end of the age range, when we're looking at families and looking at intergenerational games, and when we start looking at elders. It's been really interesting because one of the places that I keep hearing from new people that they've tried this game is in a situation where they've got a grandparent, for instance, who is beginning to experience some signs of dementia, or other kinds of age-related challenges, but is somebody who grew up playing cards. Cards are really familiar and they're something that they want to play, but they can't engage anymore. Yeah. And if they do, there's an embarrassment factor that really creates a block to joining and to having fun. Whereas a game where everybody is playing together takes away any kind of stigma, because what happens is everybody's saying, wow, I wish somebody had this card and could play it now. I wonder if anybody does. It's the same kind of support that happens for a younger child who might be playing with older family members. When somebody needs that assistance, it can take place in a way that is totally supportive. And when they do play a card that causes some kind of catastrophe, they play a combat card and kill everybody. Yeah. It doesn't matter, because everybody at the table just goes, oh no, and they start again. The dynamic is so different and creates a completely different feel in a family game.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely had that with one of my uncles who was a bridge player, right? And that space where he really loved cards, but he can no longer remember enough. It always felt like we were cheating if you would try to play with him, right? Like you're giving him the game, and he can tell, and he doesn't like that feeling. And this was different, which was quite lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, those are just two examples. The kinds of things that we've been talking about over time is that playing, whether this game or another collaborative game, has fantastic benefits in terms of just creating empathy, which sounds really obvious as we're talking about the two examples that we've used. It allows you to recognize that people have different play styles and different perspectives on what strategy is.
Yeah, and allows you to think like, okay, so this is how I would do this, and this is how they would do this, and I can see the difference, and it's okay. And that is actually very deep learning for a lot of people. So I've used the game in a couple of corporate settings with boards that may or may not be getting along, and partly because they are very different people who all think everybody knows what they know and behaves how they behave. And so the game is a nice, easy, safe way to play together and then to talk about, so did you notice these differences? And then to take those and apply them back to how we work together is a lovely way to open some of those conversations.
And perhaps, obviously, there's a lot of other possibilities we could talk about today. But for the purposes of this, we want to just kind of really focus on, this is a really fun thing that you can get involved in. So just quick recap, what we're really talking about here is just, there's a huge amount of potential for anybody who's interested in understanding and learning about conflict and how we deal with conflict, to just get more involved in trying some different types of games. And neither of us is saying stop playing competitive games. We're not, neither of us is ever going to come from that place, but we can both say, you know what, you can really, really broaden your ability to engage with people in conflict if you play some of these other games too.
Yeah, it's about broadening your skill set. Right, and adding breadth and adding kind of nuance to how you do things and how you think about how other people behave. And so we would love it if you guys would ask us some questions, and we'll, what else do we have to say today?
Well, we might as well acknowledge again that we know there's a bit of a lag, so Q&A is open. We're watching for questions, but we recognize that those might come in a little bit slowly. Maybe we can, as we're waiting for any questions, talk a little bit about perhaps what else we're doing this week.
Oh, so tonight at 8 o'clock Pacific time, I'm going to be talking about the power of private conversations and the importance of confidentiality and privacy in making some of our conflict conversations work.
Okay. And both of us are going to be at on a Facebook Live with Core Conflict Resolution Society Friday at noon. Core is, one of the things that Core does is run a writers group with a focus on conflict resolution. And we will be talking about getting together and doing writing, which is kind of an interesting topic.
Yeah, I think I'm interested.
And then I'm also doing something on Saturday. I'm going to go on and talk about, can fiction make you a better conflict resolver? Yeah, I'm having trouble saying my title. I wrote my title. I did not actually ever say my title out loud. Anyway, looking for a few questions that we're having come in. So why don't we talk about these? So,
okay. So the first question is, what are some other good collaborative games you suggest? So, I mean, if you really like games and like I think when you were like teen, college kind of ages, you like to play games like Risk, then Pandemic is wonderful. It's up to 4 people. They even have a legacy edition where the game changes every day by like every time you play by tearing stuff up and putting stickers on the board. Me and my brother and our partners have been playing Pandemic Legacy as a family, as like a purpose to get together and chat, and it's amazing, for about the last year.
Okay. I would recommend, if you're playing with either younger people or people who are learning games, I would try Forbidden Island or Forbidden Desert. Yeah. Either one of those are very similar games. Either one of those is a good training ground to play a game like Pandemic, actually.
Yes.
And I'd also say the other one that is more similar to what we've developed, the Zombie Fight or Flight, is Hanabi. It's not got as pretty of art, but it's also a card game, and it relies on being able to signal people and share information, which is fantastic.
And so Patricia wanted to know where you can find these games. And so Zombie Fight or Flight, which is our game, and this is one of my favorite cards, is available through our website, pigandpotato.com. We'll link it in the bottom so that you can find it. You can find all the information on the Pig and Potato Games Facebook page, and that's how you would find that one, or you can find Sharon and I and you ask, because we have them. A lot of the other games are available in your local game store or on the internet in places that you buy everything. Right? And Forbidden Island is great. I do play it with my kids. I think 8 is about the age at which they can really play on their own without a ton of laddering.
Yeah. And I noticed that Walter has put in a link to Forbidden Island there.
Yeah.
And yes, Walter, it is true. We are definitely not saying banish all competitive games. There are things you can learn from competitive games as well. They don't entirely teach the whole range of things you need to know to get on in the world.
Well, it's also how much of those skills do you need, because we do competitive games everywhere. Right. And so it's a little bit of an overlearning on one side and an underlearning on the other.
Yeah. There.
Okay, so I think we're at about the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you're watching this after and you add more questions in, we'll make sure we come by and answer them in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.